This story is titled, My Father Gave $370,000 to my golden sister for law school and told me you're only good enough for a diner job. Hey folks, reading through all your stories finally gave me the push to share mine. Ever had one of those moments where everything you suspected about your family was laid out for you on a silver platter? Yeah, that was me at 21. Let me give you the rundown. Growing up, I was the practical one. My parents used it like a badge of honor, but let's not kid ourselves. It was their way of saying I wasn't worth the effort. My older sister Chloe was their star child. Tennis lessons, ballet classes, private tutors, you name it. She got it. And I got the we trust you to figure it out, pep talks, and hand-me-downs. By the time I was 16, I was working a part-time job to save for a used car, while Chloe got a brand new one for her birthday. I tried to brush it off, telling myself money was tight and timing was just bad. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Anyway, things got bitter during a Saturday morning family discussion at the dining table. These little talks were my dad's idea, some misguided attempt to encourage family communication. What they really were, though, was an excuse for my parents to micromanage my life while fawning over Chloe. My dad cleared his throat. Mia, we need to talk about your future, he said, in the same tone someone might use to discuss a disappointing quarterly report. I glanced up warily. Okay. We've been reviewing some of your choices, he began, which immediately put me on edge. My choices? Like I'd handed him a resume to critique. And? I asked, bracing myself. My mom jumped in, her voice too sweet to be genuine. Well, sweetheart, we're just concerned. You've been working at that diner for over a year now, and you haven't taken any steps towards something more stable. I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. I'm saving for school, I said, my voice firm. Yes, but that's the problem, my dad replied. You're saving, but where's the plan? Chloe had a clear path by the time she was your age. She knew she wanted to go to law school and was already lining up internships and volunteer work. Meanwhile, you're stuck, my mom finished for him, her tone dripping with fake concern. Stuck. Like I was some aimless loser who decided to park her life at a dead end. Chloe had guidance, I shot back, my frustration bubbling up. She had your support every step of the way. I'm doing this on my own. That's because Chloe earned it, my dad said sharply. She showed us she was serious about her future. You've been coasting. Coasting, I repeated, my voice rising. I work 2 jobs and pay for everything myself while you've handed Chloe everything on a silver platter. That's enough, Mia, my dad said firmly. No, it's not enough, I snapped. You're acting like I'm lazy just because I'm not following Chloe's exact blueprint. Did it ever occur to you that I might have my own plans? And what are those plans? He shot back. Because all we see is someone who's comfortable scraping by. The words hit me like a slap. That's how they saw me. Not as someone working hard, but as someone who was just barely managing. Chloe, who had been silent up until now, finally chimed in. Maybe they're just trying to help, she said, being oh so reasonable. It's not like they're wrong. You could be doing more. I turned to her, disbelief written all over my face. Doing more? Like what, Chloe? Going to law school and letting mom and dad foot the bill? Not everyone gets that luxury. Don't be bitter, she said, her voice calm, like she was above it all. Are you kidding me? I said, laughing bitterly. You've never had to worry about anything in your life. You don't know the first thing about what I've had to do to get by. My mom put up her hands in that let's all calm down gesture that only made me angrier. Mia, we're just trying to guide you, she said softly. You've always been so independent. We trust you to figure things out. There it was again. Independent. Practical. Translation. We don't think you're worth the investment. Yeah, well, maybe I'm tired of figuring everything out on my own, I said, standing up abruptly. Mia, don't be dramatic, my dad said. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest, I shot back. Something you should try for once. Sit down, he said, taking on that authoritative edge he always used when he thought I was being difficult. I didn't sit down. Instead, I walked out of the dining room, my chest tight with a mix of anger and hurt I couldn't even put into words. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard my dad sigh loudly. She's always been so sensitive, he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. Why can't she just take a page out of Chloe's book? I stopped halfway up the stairs, gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. Take a page out of Chloe's book? The perfect daughter. The one who got all the support, all the opportunities, all the praise, while I was left to fend for myself. It wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. That night, after hours of stewing in my room, I overheard the conversation that shattered the last piece of hope I had for them. I was walking past my dad's office when I heard my name. I froze, leaning closer to the door. We can't afford both, Lily, my dad was saying. Chloe's future has to come first. Mia will have to settle for a diner job. Robert, my mom said weakly, we promised both girls we'd help. Chloe has real potential, he replied. Mia's not going anywhere. She'll manage. I didn't need to hear anymore. I grabbed my keys and jacket, my heart pounding as I stormed out the door. Of course, I couldn't leave without running into Chloe, who was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Mia, where are you going? She asked, barely looking up. Out, I said shortly. Are you okay? She asked, finally looking at me with that same fake concern. Everything's fine, I snapped. Perfect, actually. Just like you. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, frowning. It means nothing. I was so effing angry. Just like my future, apparently. I slammed the door behind me, leaving her sitting there with her perfect little life, completely oblivious to what it felt like to be me. I made it halfway down the driveway when I heard my dad's voice booming behind me. Mia, get back here right now! I turned to see him standing on the porch, my mom about to cry and Chloe hovering awkwardly in the doorway. Why? I yelled back. So you can tell me to my face that I'm not worth it? That Chloe's the only one who deserves a future? You were eavesdropping? My dad asked, his voice sharp with that entitled edge he always had when he thought I was out of line. Damn right I was, I fired back. And I'm glad I did. Finally got some honesty around here. Mia, please, my mom said, stepping forward. We can discuss this calmly. Discuss what? I shouted. How you've spent my whole life treating Chloe like a queen while telling me to be happy with scraps? How am I supposed to work at a diner while she chases her dreams? Chloe tried to step in. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Chloe, I interrupted. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Everything's been handed to you while I've had to fight for every scrap of attention. That's enough, my dad snapped. You're being childish and ungrateful. Ungrateful? I laughed bitterly. For what? For being ignored? For being told I'll never measure up? Or maybe I should be grateful for the diner job you've so generously planned for me. My mom was crying now. Chloe looked stunned, and my dad just glared at me like I was the problem. If that's how you feel, he said coldly, then maybe you should leave until you've calmed down. Don't worry, I said, stepping back. I'm done being the family disappointment, and I'm done playing by your rules. I got in my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. Through the windshield, I saw them standing there, the perfect little family, minus the daughter who finally walked away. As I drove off, one thought burned in my mind. I'd prove them wrong, every single one of them. After driving around aimlessly for what felt like forever, I ended up at Aunt Lila's house. Her place was my go-to escape whenever life with my parents got unbearable, which, let's be real, was more often than I like to admit. Lila lived in this old craftsman house that was comforting in a way my actual home never really was. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she somehow knew I was coming. Mia, she said, ushering me inside. What's going on? You look ready to burst. I didn't hold back. I spilled everything, and Lila actually listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, I sat there on her couch, drained and fuming all over again just from retelling it. They've always put Chloe first, I said, staring at my hands. But this is just another level. They didn't even think I deserved a chance. Lila sat quietly for a moment, then got up and walked over to a small desk in the corner of the room. She pulled open a drawer, took out an envelope, and handed it to me. Open it, she said simply. I did, and what I found inside nearly knocked the wind out of me. It was a bank statement showing an account in my name with a balance that made my eyes widen. I stared at the paper, trying to process what I was seeing. Is this mine? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lila nodded. I've been saving for you since the day you were born. Every Christmas, every birthday, every little bit I could spare. Your parents knew about Chloe's fund, but I kept this one separate. I had a feeling you'd need it more someday. I didn't know what to say. It felt like the floor had shifted under me. For years, I'd been scrimping and saving, thinking I'd have to claw my way through life while Chloe got handed every opportunity. And here was Aunt Lila, quietly looking out for me the whole time. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I finally managed to ask. I wanted to see if your parents would do the right thing, she said. But it's clear now they won't. So, I'm stepping in. Tears pricked at my eyes, and I quickly wiped them away. I hated crying, especially in front of people, but this was overwhelming. What am I supposed to do with this? I asked, gesturing to the statement. Whatever you want, Lila said. Go to school, start a business, build the life you deserve. I sat there, staring at the numbers on the page, feeling a mix of gratitude and anger. Gratitude for Lila, who had clearly been my biggest ally all along. Anger at my parents, who'd written me off without a second thought. Before I could say anything else, there was a knock at the door. Lila sighed and got up to answer it. From the muffled voices, I knew who it was before they even stepped inside. My mom. Mia, she said, walking into the room. Please, come home. Your father didn't mean it like that. Oh, he meant it, I said, standing up. He made it pretty clear where I stand in this family. You're upset, she said, her voice trembling. We can talk this through as a family. We're not a family, I interrupted. We're Chloe's fan club, and I'm just the understudy who never gets to perform. Lila stepped in then, her presence suddenly commanding. Linda, sit down, she said to my mom. My mom hesitated, but Lila wasn't the kind of person you ignored. She perched on the edge of the couch. I don't want to get in the middle of this, my mom said weakly. You're already in the middle, Lila said. And it's time to face the consequences of your choices. She turned to me. Mia, the money is yours. No strings attached. Use it to build the life you've always wanted. My mom's face went pale. Lila, you can't just... I can. Lila cut her off. And I did. I've watched you favor Chloe over Mia for years, and I'm done sitting by and letting it happen. It was like watching a dam break. My mom started crying, muttering about how she and my dad only wanted the best for us, but I didn't care anymore. Thanks, Mom, I said sarcastically, but I think I've got this handled now. After she left, Lila sat back down next to me. You're stronger than you realize, she said. I nodded, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. I wasn't sure where this was all going to lead, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I actually had a shot at something better. Lila continued to support me over the next few years as I worked to rebuild my confidence and chart my own path. Unfortunately, she passed away not long after I turned 24. Her loss hit me hard. She'd been my rock in a family that always made me feel invisible. But in a way, her unwavering faith in me became my motivation. With the money she'd set aside, I enrolled in business school and threw myself into my studies. By this point, I was well into business school and crushing it. Top of my class, working on real projects, and honestly, thriving in a way I never thought I would. My parents? Barely a blip on my radar. They tried to check in occasionally, but I wasn't interested in hearing about how Chloe was doing in law school or whatever other perfect thing she had going on. However, life decided to get interesting. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. Then came a text. Mia, it's Chloe. I need to talk to you. Please. I hadn't spoken to Chloe in years, so I figured she was reaching out for a reason. I called her back, and her voice on the other end sounded nothing like the polished, confident Chloe I remembered. She sounded rattled. I messed up, she said, barely waiting for me to say hello. What kind of mess are we talking about? I asked, leaning back in my chair. She hesitated, then blurted it all out. Her boyfriend Jack had been arrested for securities fraud. He was running some Ponzi scheme that had bilked clients out of millions, and it was all over the news. The thing is, Chloe worked at Jack's firm. Wow, I said, not even bothering to hide the sarcasm. Guess the golden child's not so golden anymore. Mia, I'm serious, she said, her voice cracking. I think I'm in real trouble. The investigators, they're looking into me too. I sat up straighter. What do you mean looking into you? Did you know what he was doing? No, she snapped, then paused. Not exactly. I mean, I found some discrepancies in the paperwork months ago, but Jack told me it was just aggressive investment strategies. He said it was normal in our line of work. You believed him? I wanted to, she admitted. He was so convincing, and I didn't want to ruin everything. I let that sink in for a moment. Chloe, who had always been the perfect, untouchable one, was now calling me, desperate for help. It felt surreal. So why are you telling me all this? I asked. Because the investigators are offering me a deal, she said. If I testify against Jack, they'll grant me immunity. But Mom and Dad keep saying I should stay loyal to him, that it's the right thing to do. I couldn't stop the laugh that escaped. Loyalty? From the people who practically disowned me? That's rich. Mia, please, sounded broken. I don't know what to do. I need your advice. You've always been smarter about these things. I didn't know what shocked me more. The fact that she was admitting she needed help, or that she actually acknowledged I was smarter than her. Take the deal, I said without hesitation. Throw Jack under the bus and save yourself. You think he'd hesitate to do the same to you? There was a long silence on her end. Finally, she said, will you come with me to the prosecutor's office? I can't do this alone. I had a midterm to study for, but for some reason I said yes. Not for Chloe exactly, but because I wanted to see this mess through. The next day, we met at the prosecutor's office. Chloe looked like a wreck. Dark circles under her eyes, no makeup, and her usual polished look replaced by a basic sweater and jeans. I barely recognized her. The meeting was tense, to say the least. The prosecutors laid it all out for her. Jack's scheme, the evidence they had against him, and how she'd been implicated because of her position at the firm. But they also made it clear that they were willing to cut her a deal if she cooperated. Chloe signed the papers with shaky hands, officially agreeing to testify against Jack. I could tell it was killing her inside, not just because she was betraying someone she'd loved, but because this was the first time in her life she wasn't the golden child. She was just another screw-up. After the meeting, we grabbed coffee because, honestly, I needed a breather after all that tension. "Thanks for being there," she said quietly, staring into her cup. "Don't thank me yet," I replied. "This is just the beginning. You've got a long road ahead." "I know," she said, "but I couldn't have done it without you." It was a strange moment. For the first time, I saw Chloe not as the perfect sister I'd grown up resenting, but as someone who had been just as manipulated and blindsided as I had. Of course, that didn't mean I was ready to forgive and forget, but it was a start. About a week after Chloe signed her deal with the prosecutors, I got a call from Aunt Lila's lawyer. Apparently, she'd been working on something big before she passed. He asked me to come to her house to go through some things she'd left behind. Chloe insisted on tagging along. Walking into Lila's house felt strange without her there. The lawyer, a no-nonsense guy, had us sit at the kitchen table. He placed a sealed envelope in front of us. "Lila wanted you both to have this," he said, sliding it across the table. Chloe and I exchanged a glance. I opened the envelope, and inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note from Lila. "To my girls, if you're reading this, you've discovered what I always suspected. Your parents' actions go far deeper than favoritism. The truth is on this drive. Use it wisely. With love, Lila." We plugged the drive into my laptop, and what we found was, well, let's just say it made Chloe's situation with Jack look like a parking ticket. The drive contained bank records, emails, and even recordings of conversations between my parents and various business partners. It painted a very clear picture. My dad had been running a scheme of his own through his firm for years. Embezzlement, shell companies, tax fraud, you name it, he dabbled in it. And guess who he used as part of his cover? Yep, me and Chloe. He had set up accounts in both our names to funnel money through. Chloe's involvement with Jack's firm wasn't a coincidence. It was part of his plan. And me? Well, he'd made sure my connection to the restaurant world looked squeaky clean, so he could launder funds through one of the diner chains I'd worked for. "Are you freaking kidding me?" I said, scrolling through the files. Chloe was pale, staring at the screen like it might explode, then said, "He knew about Jack's scheme. He knew, and he let me walk right into it." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Lila believed your parents were manipulating both of you. That's why she gathered this evidence. She wanted you to have the tools to protect yourselves." "Protect ourselves?" I said, staring at the mountain of evidence in front of us. "This isn't just about us. This could ruin everything they've built." "And rightly so," the lawyer said. Chloe and I sat there in silence, the weight of what we'd uncovered pressing down on us like a storm cloud. Every piece of paper, every recording on that USB drive, it was all staring back at us, daring us to act. "What do we do now?" Chloe asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, then back at the evidence, my mind racing. For once, the power was in our hands. We don't know what exactly to do with this mess. It's suffocating. But I thought of sharing the story here to get some perspectives. I'll post an update if things get cleared out. Update 1. All right, folks. Here's the moment you've been waiting for. After sitting on that mountain of evidence for what felt like forever, Chloe and I finally made our decision. We weren't going to let our parents get away with this. Not anymore. We decided to confront them. But this time, it wasn't going to be some emotional showdown. We were holding all the cards, and we intended to use them. We arranged a meeting with our parents under the pretense of wanting to clear the air. They showed up at Lila's house looking smug, probably thinking we were about to apologize or beg for their approval. Oh, how wrong they were. The moment they sat down, I pulled out my laptop and opened the files from the USB drive. "What's this about?" my dad asked, his tone already defensive. "Oh, just your little side hustle," I said, scrolling through the documents. "You know, embezzling funds, setting up fake accounts in our names, laundering money through my old job. Ringing any bells?" Their faces froze. My mom looked like she might faint, and my dad's usual stern expression faltered. "Mia, you don't understand," he started. "No, I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "You've been screwing us over for years, using us as pawns in your little game while pretending you were just doing what's best for the family." Chloe jumped in, her voice shaking with anger. "You set me up with Jack, didn't you? You knew what he was doing, and you let me take the fall so you could cover your tracks." My mom finally spoke, her voice weak. "We were trying to protect the family. You have to believe us." I couldn't help but laugh. "Protect the family? By throwing us under the bus? Yeah, great job. We laid everything out for them, point by point. Every shady transaction, every manipulated deal, every time they'd used us without our knowledge. They tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was airtight. Finally, I got to the ultimatum. Here's the deal, I said, sliding 2 folders across the table. Option 1. We turn all of this over to the FBI. The firm collapses, you both go to prison, and your names are dragged through the mud. Option 2. You retire quietly, transfer control of the firm to us, and disappear to that fancy beach house you bought with stolen money. You can't be serious, my dad said. Oh, I'm dead serious, I replied. You'll regret this, he said, glaring at me. Maybe, I said with a shrug, but I'll regret letting you get away with this even more. They stared at the folders. Finally, my dad picked up a pen and signed. Someday you'll understand, he said, handing the papers back. We already do, Chloe said, her voice cold. That's the problem. Walking out of Lila's house that day felt surreal. Chloe and I had just dismantled everything our parents had built, but it wasn't revenge, it was justice. The next steps were clear. Clean up the firm, rebuild it into something legitimate, and make sure no one else got screwed over by their greed. It felt like Chloe and I were on the same team. Was it worth it? Chloe asked as we left. I thought about it for a moment before answering. Ask me again when we've built something better than they ever could. So, after officially forcing our parents into retirement and taking over their mess of a company, Chloe and I had to figure out what the hell to do next. The firm was like a broken-down car. Rusted parts everywhere, barely running, and leaking problems all over the place. If we didn't step up fast, the whole thing was going to collapse. But first, we had to address the awkward elephant in the room, Chloe and me working together. I'll be honest, it felt weird at first. I'd spent most of my life resenting her, and now here we were, co-CEOs of an empire built on lies. You know they're going to be watching us, waiting for us to fail, Chloe said one day as we sat in the conference room, going through stacks of paperwork. Good, I replied. Let them. I've spent my whole life proving people wrong. What's a few more? The firm was a mess, and we had to step up to save it. Chloe handled the legal side like a pro, adapting quickly despite her privileged background. The board was skeptical, split between loyalty to our parents and doubt in us. But we pushed back, arguing the firm needed a new direction. The merger paid off, transforming the firm into a respected, profitable business. And the best move was that we renamed it after Aunt Lila, honoring the one who believed in us. Was it worth it? Chloe asked. We'll know when we've built something better, I replied. Of course, our parents couldn't stay out of it forever. My dad called one day, trying to convince me to reconsider the terms of their retirement. Apparently, the beach house wasn't as luxurious as they'd hoped. Nope, I said bluntly. You signed the papers. Enjoy Florida. He started to argue, but I hung up. I wasn't afraid to stand up to him anymore. That was it for the past few months. Fast forward to the present, specifically last week, I got a call from a name I hadn't heard in forever. Jack. Yes, that Jack. Chloe's ex, the guy who ran the Ponzi scheme, got arrested and basically kickstarted this entire mess. At first, I thought it was a prank, but nope, it was him. Fresh out of prison, and apparently, he had unfinished business. Jack started off with this fake nice tone, like we were old friends or something. Mia, he said, all casual, I've been following what you and Chloe have done with the firm. Impressive work. What do you want, Jack? I asked, cutting straight to the point. Well, he said, it seems your little operation has grown into something quite profitable. And since Chloe and I were so close back in the day, I figured maybe I deserve a piece of the pie. You guys, I almost laughed out loud. Deserve a piece of the pie? The audacity of this man. You must have hit your head in prison, I told him. You've got zero claim to anything we're doing. He lost it. I wouldn't be so sure, he said. You know, I still have some interesting records from my time with Chloe. Things that might be of interest to certain people, like the FBI. And just like that, my blood ran cold. After hanging up, I immediately called Chloe. She was furious, of course, but there was this little hint of hesitation that made me wonder. Chloe, I said, trying to stay calm, is there anything Jack could actually have on you? Anything that might make this situation worse? No, she said quickly. Too quickly. Chloe, I pressed. Don't lie to me. There was a long pause, and then she sighed. There might be a couple of things, she admitted. Apparently, back when Chloe was working at Jack's firm, she'd signed off on a few documents he'd slipped onto her desk. She swears she didn't know what they were at the time. But if the FBI got their hands on them, they might look bad. Really bad. So now we're in damage control mode. I've already reached out to that restaurateur and our legal team to figure out our options. But part of me is wondering if Jack is bluffing. He's desperate, obviously, and probably just fishing for a payout. But then again, this is Jack we're talking about. The guy who conned dozens of people out of millions. He doesn't bluff without a plan. Here's where I need your advice, guys. Do we 1. Call his bluff and let him make whatever move he's planning? It's risky, but if he's lying, we don't lose anything. 2. Pay him off to shut him up, though that feels gross, and I'd rather burn the money than give it to him. I'm torn. Chloe's freaking out, which is understandable, but I can't help feeling like we're being dragged back into a mess we've already cleaned up once. Why can't people just stay in the past where they belong? Anyway, that's where we're at. Let me know what you do because I need some fresh perspectives before I lose my mind. I'll keep you all posted once we figure out our next move. Stay tuned. Final update. All right, folks, here's the final update. After my last post, Chloe and I spent a lot of time going back and forth on how to handle Jack. Calling his bluff was risky, but the more we looked into it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just an empty threat. The documents he had weren't just bad. They were enough to raise serious questions about Chloe's involvement back when she worked at his firm. So we decided to take control before Jack could pull the rug out from under us. Paying him off was off the table. We weren't about to reward his scheming. Instead, we did what he probably wasn't expecting. We went to the FBI ourselves. It wasn't an easy decision, but with our legal team's guidance, we handed over the documents Jack had sent us, along with the evidence we had that Chloe's involvement was unintentional. Chloe gave a statement, explaining how Jack had manipulated her, and how she'd unknowingly signed off on things he'd slipped onto her desk. It was nerve-wracking, to say the least. But here's the thing about dealing with someone like Jack. The truth has a way of shining a light on all the cracks in his story. A few days later, we got word that Jack had tried to approach the FBI himself. He claimed he had key evidence against Chloe and our firm, but his desperation worked against him. The investigators had already seen through his act, thanks to the context we provided. Jack is now under investigation for extortion, on top of his previous charges. As for Chloe, the FBI cleared her of any wrongdoing, acknowledging that she was another victim of Jack's manipulation.